My name is Delaney, and in this presentation, my partner Christine and I will be highlighting the progress of our report on the key environmental impacts of three common construction materials: concrete, steel, and glulam. The expansion of the construction industry has had detrimental impacts on our environment and our world. As our cities grow and further industrialize, we must take responsibility for the results of our actions and find solutions to global climate concerns. Largely due to the development of natural areas into massive metropoles, structural and environmental engineers worldwide are exploring ways to mitigate the environmental issues that large urban centers cause. With this, as our world continues to develop, it is crucial that we understand the connection between the buildings that define our cities and their natural world. To understand this relationship, our report will compare environmental parameters of common materials, namely concrete, steel, and glulam, which is a type of timber. Conventional building materials used in the construction industry, such as these, have been studied extensively to determine their environmental impacts. The results of these studies have shown that each material interacts with and affects its environment differently. To easily compare the environmental impacts of different materials, environmental product declarations, or EPDs, can be used. EPDs review various key environmental parameters. They provide quantitative data to describe the overall impact a material has at a certain stage of the project, for example, in production, or just overall. The effects are described by key environmental parameters such as global warming potential and ozone depletion potential. The results of an EPD then allow for more sustainable choices to be made when developing a project. Figure 1 shows a comparison between the energy released from the building of sheds made of wood, more specifically glulam, steel, and concrete. This bar graph illustrates the discrepancies between the global warming potentials, or in other words, the effects of harmful gases released by the use of each material throughout the entire project. Our report seeks to explain the key environmental parameters that appear in EPDs and to quantitatively compare the environmental effects of these materials in their production phase, similar to as was done with this project. This analysis then allows us to consider the advantages and disadvantages of each material. The report was commissioned by Dr. Chu at the University of Alberta and is being written specifically to meet the requirements of his structural engineering project and for the purposes of our CIVE240 analytical report. At this time, we have completed a first and second draft of the report. For the first draft, we completed research to find credible EPDs for concrete, glulam, and steel. We also found sources that helped describe the key environmental parameters of EPDs. This helped us to better understand the significance of the values and provided clarity in comparing the overall impact of each material. Using the sources found during our research, we then wrote the first draft of the background and discussion. For the second draft, we used peer review feedback to help revise the first drafts of our background and discussion. We also drafted the abstract, introduction, and conclusion. Currently, we are working on the final drafts of the abstract, introduction, background, discussion, and conclusion. We are also in the process of changing the data for the key environmental parameters of the materials so that they are all in the same units to allow easier comparison. This requires that we convert our data for steel from metric tons to cubic millimeters, as steel is not commonly measured by cubic millimeters just based on its density and other factors. Finally, we are collecting figures and creating tables to support our background and discussion. Before the final draft is submitted, we still have to write the cover letter. Additionally, a final revision of all sections needs to be made, and we will also be making some minor formatting corrections so that our report follows all of the IEEE guidelines.
Through the completion of the report, we faced three main challenges. The first had to do with finding environmental product declarations, or EPDs. Initially, we found it difficult to find EPDs which not only came from credible institutions, but also described the appropriate materials that we were discussing in this report. To solve this problem of finding credible EPDs, we went back to Dr. Chu's presentation to look at the institutions from which he had drawn sources. As well, we researched other nationally accredited standard organizations that provided EPDs for the materials discussed in our report. From this, we were able to find credible sources to complete the project. The second challenge we faced was in scheduling and assigning tasks. Before starting the first draft and assigning sections of the report to each partner, we did not consider what each other's schedules were over the entirety of the project. We only considered what we each had going on in the moment. As such, we found ourselves working on and sharing information with each other required for other sections at the last minute. In order to solve the scheduling and task assignment issues we faced in the first draft, we laid out our schedules in detail before working on the second draft. We quickly realized that I, Christine, had more time earlier in the week to work on the report, while Delaney had more time later in the week. Since the discussion so heavily relied on the background, we decided that the partner who had more time early in the week should work on the background, while the other partner should work on the discussion. As a result, we ended up changing the sections originally assigned to each partner. This allowed the second and final drafts to be completed quicker and with no scheduling issues. Finally, the third challenge we faced in writing the report was in discerning what information should be in the background versus what belongs in the discussion. In order to solve this problem, we used peer review feedback from our first draft to help create better separation between the background and discussion in our second draft. We also reviewed the rubric and assignment expectations more closely to ensure all criteria were met. We have since shifted certain information to ensure that the background consists solely of data and facts, and that the discussion then elaborates on and connects them. Our timeline for completion for the report spans over the next few days. We will have the cover letter written and all other things that may need a rewrite based on peer review feedback completed by April 12th. All final revisions and formatting corrections will be completed by April 14th. We will review our feedback from the Center for Writers, which we expect to receive latest by the 15th of April. And lastly, we will submit the final draft of the analytical report by midnight on April 15th. In closing, we have completed the first and second drafts of the analytical report at this time and are currently working on completing the final draft. We hope this presentation has provided valuable insight into the purpose of the report, as well as our progress on the report. We look forward to submitting our final report and believe it will provide great insight into the environmental impacts of concrete, steel, and glulam. Thank you for your time.